This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. And my guest today is Tina Bernstein, and I met Tina through podmatch.com. I meet so many wonderful guests there. And what I like about the organization, Tina, it's almost like a dating service, so to speak. There's a little bit of a bio. You can see what you might have in common, or even what you don't have in common that you want to bring out to your listeners. But what I loved about Tina's message is that it's not about age. When you know you need to make a change, you have to take that step forward. So, Tina Bernstein, take us on a little voyage and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So I suppose my journey starts when I actually had a nervous breakdown at the tender age of 26. And it's very blurry what happened before and then, what happens afterwards. But that took me into a long-term psychotherapy because I just wasn't coping very well with everything, really. So, yeah, that took me on a long journey, and I absolutely loved therapy. I really did. I just felt what a wonderful thing to be able to learn about oneself. What a wonderful thing to be able to delve into one's psychology, one's mind, one's background, one's childhood. I mean, I'm not trying to glorify it and say it's all fun, Forgive me, it wasn't all fun. But I found it incredibly interesting, and I was very, very curious about it. And I think people shy away from therapy because it's the unknown, and it's
Right.
the kind of I don't want to open a can of worms. But actually, what I think in life is if you suppress things, they're going to come out anyway in some form or other, and you actually don't know how they're going to come out. So anyway, I stayed for a long time, maybe longer than I needed to, because I found it really fascinating. I also really enjoyed 5 years of group therapy. I found that very helpful for later on in business, understanding people, understanding how I'm viewed by people. So yeah, between the one-to-one and the group therapy, I sort of started healing. And then I suppose for me, it took a long time to understand what I really wanted to do. I dabbled in quite a lot of things. I ran one or two different businesses, but I actually always knew that the overriding arch for me is about sort of psychology and well-being. I thought if we don't have that, if we don't have our mental health, then actually we
Right.
don't have anything, right? So
Right.
you can accumulate money and wealth and I don't know, people and family and children and whatever you want. But if you really don't have your physical and mental health, we have very little. And I think after long-term therapy, I realized that that is something that I really wanted to either give back or work with. It just took me a very long time to understand what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a therapist. Most people think I would make a good therapist. They don't understand I wouldn't because I'm not very patient if I have to listen to the same thing 5 times and there isn't any movement. So I knew early on that that just wasn't my calling. But as a designer, because I studied graphic design and I'm a designer and I love color, I just finally realized, oh, I know, I want sort of self-help to be more colorful and more visual and more kind of sexy in a way, because it was still very closed doors and
Sure.
you're not going to say you're in therapy and things like that. And that's when I just realized also it was the zeitgeist. Everything in life has a timing, I think. And I knew when I started, which is nearly 10 years ago now, is it was kind of people were starting to talk about things a little bit more. So it was the right zeitgeist. So that is when I started or how I started Mapology Guides.
So, as I listen to this, the first thing that piques my mind at the age of 26, things totally unraveled for you. They may have been unraveling. You didn't recognize they were unraveling. And many of us think, come on, young people, you've got the world by the string. Why, how can you have a nervous breakdown of any sort at a young age? But the reality of it is we're seeing children today actually going through this process because a lot of us are told what we're supposed to do. And we do that. And then we think, this just doesn't fit for me. You're asking me to add 1 + 1 to equal 2. And I'm sorry, when I look at that, I see 5. Okay. But we're not giving people that opportunity to explain why they see it differently. And I think that's part of the process. The other thing you said, you sort of changed gears about 10 years ago. And for our listeners out there, I always tell people I didn't change until I was in my mid-50s. And at 74, I am so proud I made the changes I have, and I continue to make them. You too started making the changes at 50.
Absolutely.
So, what gave you that feeling that, you know what, I can do this? The past doesn't matter. Past brought me here so I can do this.
Absolutely. I think for me, I've always felt, and I remember my first therapist saying to me, a woman comes into her power at 40. I'll never forget that because I couldn't wait to turn 40. I literally couldn't wait. And I swear I woke up at 40 and went, oh my God, I know now what she was saying. And it was this real sense of, I don't give a hoot about anything anymore. I don't really care what people think. And I think as women, particularly, I think a lot of us, maybe our age group, I don't know about the younger generation, but we're brought up to be nurturers and carers. And, we always want to please people. I was definitely a people pleaser in my 20s, before I went to therapy. And I think there's something so powerful for women to just realize, do you know what? No, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't need to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't care about this. I don't care what you say. And I think that liberation for me, I do really remember it was just such an eye-opener. It was just magic. I just realized I have full agency and I can do what I want. And I did from that day on. It was really interesting. And I think it really took me till the age of 40. And I had long-term therapy to really be able to firmly say no to what I didn't want to do and yes to the things I wanted to do. And I suppose my whole thing about Mapology Guides is also, everything is about empowering people. All the maps, everything is about having some self-awareness, some self-knowledge, some self-improvement, but about the empowerment. And I felt that sometimes people need permission to do something or to be able to say no.
As
Please.
children, we hear that word no a lot, okay? And 99% of it's for our best interests, okay? As our hand goes to touch the stove and mom yells no and grabs your hand away, she's protecting you. However, that word no sticks in our heads, and especially females, because you are correct that there are many generations of us that have been brought up that if you just make somebody else happy, you're going to be happy. You're going to see them smile and laugh and be grateful, and you're just going to pull that in. And I truly believed that until my 50s. And it was like, I see everybody else happy. And I'm just not content with what I'm doing. So I had to understand that I didn't have first of all, I can't make anybody else happy. They have to receive it. They have to want to be. And it's
Absolutely.
like, I have to do that for me. So when you started to realize that, you know what, I'm going to learn the word no myself, how difficult was it for you to be able to say it the first time?
Hugely difficult. I know how difficult it is. We have a map called How to Grow Your No, which is one of our bestsellers, and it is all about saying no and the different nuances how to say no. Because it's very different if I say no to somebody who knows me very well to maybe saying no to you the first time I meet you. You know, there are different nuances. But I think it's the first time that you're able to just say no is one of the most empowering times. And I hope it happens to everyone because it's that first time that is so hard. Because in your mind, it's like, oh, I better say no. Oh, I better go to that party. Oh, I better please them. Oh, I better, you know. And actually, in the end, as you said, the one suffering is yourself because you're putting everyone else first. And, you know, there are people in all our lives that benefit from us saying no. I used to have lots of people who benefit from me saying no. Of course, now I don't, but they benefit from you actually saying no and from you not being able to say no. And I want people to know that. I want people to know that actually you are number one. And as you said, you know, you've got to look after yourself and you've got to be okay with yourself. And then afterwards, you learn how to say no. You know, you learn to say, look, I'd love to come for Christmas, but, you know, I've got a few gut issues. And so I don't go to big gatherings because afterwards I don't feel well. And, you know, people who really understand would say, of course, you know, don't come. We totally understand. So it's a process to say no. But I say, and it is on our map, it says this word will change your life. It is life changing. To be able to say no is literally life changing.
And the rest of us have to learn not to be afraid to hear that word. You know, sometimes we think, oh, I've invited you for the holidays and you said no. What's wrong with me? Why don't you want to be with me? Or, um, you know, you want to talk to a friend on the phone and you call and you said you have a few minutes to talk and they're really busy and they say, no, not right now. And you think, oh my gosh, what happened to our relationship? Problem is that we're not communicating properly either.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have learned, and even most recently, I was the giver in my marriage. My husband's a wonderful guy. He's willing to do things, but he really likes to be asked. I don't like, I didn't like to ask. And so I was getting disappointed because certain things weren't happening. And then I finally realized, you know what? I don't have to do everything that he asked for. And so I'm now at that point where I'll go, you know, I really think that's something you should do. And he'll look at me and go, oh, okay. It's like we've been married 40 years and it took me 35 years to figure this out. But that's part of that people pleaser. If I keep
Exactly.
pleasing him, we're going to make it to 40 or 45 or whatever. But if I don't say yes, then what's going to happen? And the reality of it is, and you hit it on the head, if we're not taking care of ourselves, all the people we're taking care of aren't really getting what they need either.
It is all about communication. And actually, you're very right. And I remember in therapy, my therapist saying, but you don't allow your partner maybe to do something because you're in there first. You know, you don't allow him to actually raise to the plate kind of thing. So we've had to all learn lots of things and we have to unlearn things in terms of people pleaser. We have to unlearn to understand. And sometimes actually people haven't, I remember people saying to me, but I never asked you to pick me up from the airport. You know, when I was
Right.
much younger,
Yeah.
let's say I would go to the airport and then I would be upset because she or he didn't do whatever. But I never asked you, you know, so as you said, it's a real learning process and it's all about communication. it is all about getting to know each other and saying, this is who I am. And when you call me and I say I'm busy, it has nothing to do with you. I'm literally busy and I will call you back, because we all have had rejection. We all understand that part. So if we can all communicate in a way that doesn't make the other person feel rejected, then that's a good thing. But that's where, people find that challenging. And I know from my own life now, I'm very much somebody who says no all the time. And some people can take it and others can't. I understand, but I can't take responsibility for the other people not being able to be maybe at that stage where they understand the way I've said no, which wasn't about a rejection or anything. It was just
Exactly.
about I'm not doing it or I don't want to do it. So it is very, very complex. I think we're making it sound sort of easy, but it is very complex if you are not at that stage where you either can say no or are still a people pleaser. But what I want to say is, and I think you and I are both great examples, it can change. It can change. That's why I brought out the Mapology Guide. It literally can change, but you have to apply yourself and you have to, I suppose, take some risks, which is, somebody might be offended or somebody might say, I don't want to be your friend anymore. But those things are good. But in the beginning, they're really, really hard for people.
Well, absolutely. For the last 4 years, we've been going to upstate New York to have Thanksgiving with my brother and his family. And up until this year, every year when we went, because I felt like I'm the guest, I felt like I had to go along with what everybody else wanted. And this was the first year that if you say you're busy, you're going off doing something else, well, then you know what? I'm going to go do something else. Um, every once in a while there'd be that twinge with, why didn't they make a little bit more time for me? But then I'd realize, hey, did I ask them for that? I didn't. And I'm in some ways, even though I'm a guest, I'm still intruding on their regular, other than Thanksgiving Day, I'm intruding on their life. And as soon as that would click in my brain, it would be like, that's okay. It's all right that they're busy. I'll find them a half hour from now, an hour from now. But it takes a lot of realizing how would we really want to be treated in this situation? You know, you know, if they can say no to me, how can I learn in my giving way to say no to them? So explain to me the Mapology guides, because I'm really curious how they work and, maybe get some of us on a new path.
Well, they're very visual. So, of course, we have a lot of self-help books out there, and the topics we choose are very meaty that people write books about boundaries, having boundaries, being able to say no. There are books and books out there. So our maps are like an A2 sheet of paper folded down to an A6. So you have to curate what you think is really necessary to be on a map and tell the story and for the reader to understand it. They're not meant to be like tomes of whatever, because they're meant to be for people to get that first self-awareness. Because if they afterwards wanted to find out more about how to say no or about keeping boundaries or whatever, they'll find many more tools. So I wouldn't say they're like an introductory, but in a way they probably are to a big subject matter. Like we have a map called the Anger Apothecary, which is about anger management. And we try and instill a bit of fun into it. So there's a lot of color, a lot of beautiful illustration, but also a bit of fun, because I believe that we all have mental health issues. We
Yes.
all have something we can't deal with or we're embarrassed to talk about. And I don't want these things to be, sort of shameful or difficult. I want them to be open. So I always encourage people to have a map and sort of do it with a friend or do it with a member of family or read it alone. But they're meant to be conversation starters. They're meant to break the ice. And often people, when I see them opening a map and sort of, they will laugh at something. And I know because they've just recognized themselves in it.
Right.
And that's a great thing to do when you recognize yourself. And then you go, oh, I do that. So they are serious, obviously, but they're not meant to be taken too seriously because they're meant to educate and transform. They're meant to get you from A to B. That's also why I call them maps. Because on a map, we find ourselves where we are and we sort of travel from A to B, right? So I'd love people to travel from A to B, having gained some insight, having gained some self-knowledge, and then maybe are willing to look deeper into things if they feel they need to. These are not, I love people to go to therapy. So these are not instead of therapy, but they're also with therapy. Therapists buy them as a conversation starter sometimes, coaches buy them, to help people along. So, and also they're very good for neurodiversity because they're very, very visual. And as we know, not everybody reads 400-page books, and
Right.
there's also sort of a lack of concentration span these days. So yeah, and I just love, I mean, I'd love to do 500 different topics, because there's so many things one can do. At the moment there are 15. And there is something for everyone. There is something, whether you're an overthinker or you can't say no. We have one called the Expedition Towards a Meaningful Life. So there are some, you could even delve into purpose and passion and, in just different topics, really. And as I said, they're really meant to give people some self-awareness and some insight, which I sometimes think can be lacking in some people. And as I said, sometimes people, they're so worried that they're going to open a can of worms. I remember people saying to me, I don't cry because if I start crying, I never stop. Well, that isn't actually very true. You do stop crying, but it's actually very healthy to cry, right? And shed the layers of the onion and all of that. So, yes, I'm all for self introspection and self-awareness. I think it helps us to navigate this world, which is crazy, especially right now, but in a better way. Because if you understand yourself, then you understand your part in the world. And so you can navigate it better and you will have better relationships and better communication skills. I think just walking around and not really understanding oneself, yeah, is maybe more tricky. But as we said, things happen without us knowing what will happen. But I do feel things catch up with people. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I always thought I knew the path I was on and what I was doing. Uh, when I was in corporate America at a college, um, every Friday, our manager would call us all into her office. We'd sit around and she'd start with sometimes, what's your favorite food? But by this stage of the game where I was working, I didn't know anything about myself anymore. I was so empowered into my job and into my family. And they'd come around to me and I'd go, I don't know. And she'd look at me and she goes, that's not an answer. Well, it was my answer at the time. The next week it'd be, what's your favorite book? What's your favorite song? And almost every week I would just say, I don't know. And it bothered me because everybody in that group started, I wouldn't say making fun, but judging me for it. Well, go out and try something to eat and then tell us if you like it or don't like it. It was like, I wasn't at that mindset at that point. When I left the job, it was about 30 days later that I asked myself, what is your favorite food? I didn't come up with one. I came up with about 4 or 5. It was like, wow, I came up with something. Then it was weeks later, I was listening to something on the internet, and it was like, I read a book about that once before. It was the culture that I was in that I allowed to rob me from what I needed. And so many of us do that because we think that this is the only job we can have. So if this is the only job I can have, I just have to give into it and make my way through it. The reality of it is, once we know who we are, we might make that job better, or we might actually have the energy to pick up and leave and find something else. And it sounds like that's what your maps are guiding us. Take a look. Where are you now? Where do you want to go? Map it out, even if it's only one step. Map out
Absolutely.
that one step.
It's that seed, isn't it? It's that seed that grows. And I always say, a lot of people hang them as posters or frame them or, and sometimes I ask them, well, what does it do for you? Oh, and they say, well, because when I walk past them every day, it sort of goes into your subconscious. You see, sometimes we might not be ready to hear something or to read something. But if it is in the the subconscious keeps working, doesn't it? It keeps sort of working. And then one day you find yourself saying no or whatever it is. And so I'm a great believer of that. I'm a great believer of just dabbling and trying something. And even if you're not ready, it doesn't matter. It's just there could be a little seed, like with you, with the food, that all of a sudden translated into the books and the music and maybe what you like wearing afterwards, But you started somewhere, which was with the food. So that's wonderful. And I know what that's like. I was where you were too, when people used to say, well, what do you like or what do you want? And I was just like, I don't know. And I always said things that I thought people wanted me to say or other people liked, because I thought, well, that must be right because so and so likes that. But I didn't know who I was.
I love it. So, how can my listeners follow you, uh, get Mapology guides, and maybe take the next step into the new year?
Yeah, I mean they're really great for starting the new year off, I think, because they're sort of empowering, as I said. So, you would feel sort of good about it, even if you don't do anything about it, you feel good about it. I mean, people can follow me on Instagram, obviously on Facebook, and LinkedIn and all the socials. But we do send worldwide. We do ship worldwide. So they can go on mapologyguides.com, which is the website, the online store. And yeah, like I'm always happy. People can email me, ask questions, or ask for advice. I mean, we do have bundles for specific. So if you're a doer, there's 3 maps. If you're feeling frazzled, there's 3 maps. There is a Christmas emergency kit one, which I think would be wonderful for people to carry around this month because, we know that Christmas can bring up lots of sort of things for people. And yeah, and that's how you get to Mapology Guides. But as I said, I'm always open to people asking for advice. Sometimes I get an email going, which one do you think is best? And I email back saying, could you give me a little bit more information,
Right,
maybe
exactly.
an age, and I never hear back.
Yeah.
Because, that's, I mean, people do find it difficult. And I really appreciate that. I really understand how difficult it is to take that step of even talking about something like this. But my DMs are open, my emails are open, and I'm very happy to always suggest or help or, yeah.
Well, and all that information is going to be in the show notes. So anybody who's listening, go back to the show notes. You'll see her website information, email, all that, so that you don't have to say, hey, this was a great podcast, but guess what? I don't know how to contact Tina. Well, you will. So,
But also to our listeners, it's never too late. You've got
absolutely.
2 women here that tell you it's never too late. It literally is never too late. You can start at 80, you can start at 90, you can start at 50, you can start at 30, you can start whenever you want. It's never too late to be empowered, to have agency, and to be the person you're meant to be.
That is wonderful. I love that. And as we go into the new year, everybody take care of yourself first.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Thank you,
Thank you
Tina.
so much. It was such a pleasure to be on here. Thank you.